Harold Whitman was grading papers at his kitchen table when the first letter arrived. It was a Tuesday morning in 1993, 3 months after his retirement from Lincoln Elementary School, and the silence of his empty house felt heavier than the November rain against his windows. The envelope was addressed to Harold Whitman, close enough to his actual name that the Postal Service had delivered it to 1247 Maple Street instead of wherever Harold Whitman lived. Inside was a letter written in careful cursive by someone named Emma, age 8, asking Harold if he remembered her from summer camp. "Dear Harold, do you remember me? I was the girl with braids who sat next to you at lunch. I wanted to say thank you for sharing your cookies with me when I forgot mine. My mom says I should always thank people who are kind. Love, Emma." Harold read the letter 3 times, each reading making his chest feel a little tighter. He hadn't been to summer camp in 70 years, and no little girl had sat next to him at lunch in decades. But something about Emma's careful handwriting, the way she'd drawn a smiley face next to her name, made him reach for his pen instead of marking "Return to Sender" on the envelope. He wrote back, "Dear Emma, of course I remember you. How could I forget the girl with the most beautiful braids at camp? I'm so glad my cookies helped. That's what friends do. They share what they have. I hope you're having a wonderful year at school. Your friend, Harold." Harold walked to the mailbox in the rain, his arthritis protesting with each step. He told himself it was just one letter, a small kindness to a child who would probably never write again. He was wrong on both counts. Emma wrote back 2 weeks later, this time with a drawing of 2 stick figures sharing cookies under a rainbow. Her letters came monthly through that first winter. Updates about school, complaints about her little brother, excitement about her loose tooth. Harold found himself looking forward to the pale pink envelopes that appeared in his mailbox like small gifts. He learned that Emma lived in Portland with her mother, Sarah, a single parent working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Emma's father had left when she was 5, and the Harold she thought she was writing to, some boy from summer camp, had become an anchor point in her young life. Harold began timing his grocery trips around the mail delivery. He bought special stationery, careful to match the formality level of an 8-year-old. He researched children's interests, subscribed to National Geographic Kids, and learned about Pokemon cards and Tamagotchis just to have something to discuss with his small pen pal. By spring, Emma was addressing him as "Dear Harold, my friend," and Harold found himself living for Tuesday afternoons when her letters typically arrived. In 1995, a second misdirected letter arrived. This one was from a teenage boy named Marcus in Detroit, looking for his cousin Harold, who'd moved to Michigan. Marcus was struggling in high school, getting into fights, and needed advice about dealing with bullies. Harold stared at the letter for 3 days before answering. He told himself he was just helping one more child, just until Marcus found his real cousin. But deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. The truth was simpler and more complicated. Harold Whitman was lonely, and these strangers' letters had become the most meaningful part of his week. Marcus's letters were different from Emma's, angrier, more desperate, filled with the particular pain of a 16-year-old who felt invisible in his own life. Harold found himself researching teenage psychology, remembering his most challenging students, crafting responses that walked the line between encouragement and reality. "Dear Marcus, I understand feeling angry when people treat you badly. But fighting back doesn't make you stronger. It makes you like them. The strongest thing you can do is choose to be different. Choose to be the person you wish they were. Your friend, Harold. The letters from both Emma and Marcus multiplied. Soon Harold was receiving mail addressed to Harold Whitman, Harold Whitman, Harold Whitman, and a dozen other variations. The Postal Service, apparently giving up on precision, delivered them all to his door. By 1998, Harold was corresponding with 17 different people across 12 states. There was Jennifer, a college student in California, who thought Harold was her high school boyfriend. Robert, an elderly man in Florida seeking his army buddy from Korea. Lisa, a young mother in Ohio looking for her estranged brother, and dozens of others. Each letter brought a new life story into Harold's quiet house. He kept detailed files on every correspondent, their ages, their problems, their dreams, their family situations. His dining room table became command central, covered with stationery, stamps, and careful notes about who needed encouragement and who needed tough love. Emma, now 13, was dealing with middle school bullying. Marcus, 21, had joined the military and was writing from basic training. Jennifer had graduated college and was planning her wedding. Robert's wife had died, and he wrote long letters about grief and loneliness that broke Harold's heart. Harold's days took on new structure. Morning coffee with the newspaper, then letter writing until lunch. Afternoon walks to the post office, evening reading to prepare for tomorrow's correspondence. He subscribed to magazines about everything from teenage fashion to military life to cooking, all to better understand his distant friends. His neighbors thought he'd become a prolific letter writer, corresponding with family across the country. Harold never corrected them. The truth was too complicated to explain. He had accidentally become a family to strangers who needed one. 2003 brought Harold's biggest challenge yet. Marcus was deployed to Iraq, and his letters became increasingly dark. Emma, now 18, was pregnant and scared, unable to tell her mother. Robert was battling cancer. Jennifer was going through a difficult divorce. Lisa's son had been arrested. For the first time in 30 years of teaching, Harold felt overwhelmed by his students' needs. Except these weren't students. They were real people living real lives, depending on a fiction that Harold had created and sustained for a decade. He considered stopping several times that year. The ethical weight of his deception grew heavier with each letter. These people trusted him, shared their deepest secrets with him, took his advice on major life decisions. What right did he have to influence their lives based on relationships that didn't exist? But then Marcus wrote from Baghdad, saying Harold's letters were the only thing keeping him sane. Emma wrote that she'd decided to keep her baby because Harold had taught her that love was stronger than fear. Robert wrote that their correspondence had given him reason to keep fighting the cancer. Harold kept writing. The closest Harold came to discovery was in 2006, when Emma announced she was moving to his city and wanted to meet in person. She was 21, married to a good man named David, with a 3-year-old daughter named Hope. She wanted Harold to meet his honorary granddaughter. Harold spent 3 sleepless nights crafting a response. He invented a sudden illness, a move to a retirement community, restrictions on visitors. He hated lying to Emma, but the alternative, destroying her faith in a friendship that had shaped her entire adolescence, seemed worse. Emma sent get-well cards and promised to visit once Harold was feeling better. Harold filed the cards with the hundreds of others he'd received over the years: birthday cards, Christmas cards, graduation announcements, wedding invitations, baby pictures, sympathy cards when he'd invented the death of imaginary relatives. His house had become a museum of other people's lives, and Harold was the anonymous curator. When email became common in the late 2000s, Harold faced a new challenge. Several of his correspondents asked for his email address, wanting faster communication. Harold, who had learned to use a computer only for basic letter formatting, had to navigate the world of email accounts and instant communication. He created separate email accounts for each of his personas: Harold.Whitman, 1947@gmail.com, hwhitmen.teacher@yahoo.com, haroldw.michigan@hotmail.com. Learning to manage multiple email identities while maintaining consistent personas tested Harold's organizational skills in ways that 30 years of teaching never had. Marcus, now married with twin boys, sent photos of his children. Emma shared pictures from her daughter's first day of school. Robert, having beaten cancer, sent updates about his new lease on life and his volunteer work at the local hospital. Harold printed every photo, organized them in albums, and found himself genuinely caring about people he'd never met but somehow helped raise. By 2015, Harold was 82 and corresponding with 43 people across North America. His original pen pals had become adults with children of their own. Emma's daughter, Hope, now 18, had started writing to Grandpa Harold directly. Marcus's twins wrote thank-you notes for birthday cards. Jennifer's 3 children sent drawings and school pictures. Harold's health was declining. Arthritis made writing painful. His eyesight required stronger glasses, and his memory occasionally mixed up details from different correspondents' lives. But stopping felt impossible. These people had become more real to him than his actual neighbors, more important than his few remaining college friends who drifted away over the years. He hired a part-time assistant, telling her he was helping elderly friends maintain correspondence. Mary, a kind woman in her 50s, helped him organize his files and occasionally typed letters when his handwriting became illegible. She never questioned why Harold received mail addressed to so many different spellings of his name. The truth came out by accident in 2018, when Emma's daughter, Hope, was researching family history for a school project. 23 years old and working as a journalist, Hope decided to investigate the mysterious Harold, who had been such an important figure in her mother's life. Public records showed no Harold Whitman at the address where Emma had been sending letters for 25 years. Social media searches turned up nothing. Census data revealed only Harold Whitman, no E in the last name. An 85-year-old retired teacher who lived alone and had no children. Hope drove to Harold's house on a cold March morning, her mother beside her in the passenger seat. Emma, now 33, and the mother of 2 daughters, had been writing to Harold for over half her life. The possibility that their friendship was built on a lie had shaken her faith in human connection itself. Harold answered the door in his robe and slippers, a man whose face Emma had imagined 1,000 different ways but had never actually seen. He was smaller than she'd pictured, more fragile, with kind eyes behind thick glasses and hands spotted with age. "Are you Harold Whitman?" Hope asked. "Yes," Harold said quietly. "The Harold Whitman who's been receiving my mother's letters for 25 years?" Harold looked at Emma, recognizing her somehow, despite never having met her. Maybe it was something in her eyes, or the way she stood, or just the inevitability of this moment that he'd been dreading and anticipating for decades. "Yes," he said again. Emma stepped forward. "I'm Emma. I've been writing to you since I was 8 years old." Harold's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I remember every letter." They sat in Harold's living room, surrounded by photo albums and file cabinets full of correspondence. Harold's hands shook as he poured tea, trying to explain 3 decades of deception that had somehow become love. "I never meant for it to continue," he said. "That first letter from you, Emma, you were so young, so hopeful. I couldn't bring myself to disappoint you." "But you lied to me," Emma said, though her voice held more confusion than anger. "You lied to all of us." "I did," Harold admitted, "but I never lied about caring. Every piece of advice I gave you, every word of encouragement, that was real. You became like a granddaughter to me, even though you didn't know who I really was." Hope, the journalist, asked the practical questions. "How many people are we talking about? How long has this been going on? Do any of them know the truth?" Harold showed them his filing system, detailed records of 43 ongoing correspondences, some spanning decades. Emma's file was 3 inches thick. Marcus's correspondence filled 2 binders. Robert had died the previous year, and Harold had attended his funeral, sitting in the back as a stranger mourning a friend. "You went to his funeral?" Emma asked. "He had no family left," Harold said simply. "Someone needed to be there." Emma and Hope spent 4 hours at Harold's house that day. They read through 25 years of correspondence, watching Emma's life unfold through her letters to Harold and Harold's thoughtful responses. They saw a lonely 8-year-old become a confident teenager, then a struggling young adult, then a successful mother and teacher. "You shaped my life," Emma said as they prepared to leave. "Every major decision I made, I asked myself what Harold would think. When I decided to keep hope, when I chose David, when I became a teacher, you were the voice in my head telling me I was capable of good things." "You were capable of good things long before you met me," Harold said. "I just reminded you." Emma hugged him then, the first physical contact they'd ever had. Harold felt like he might collapse from the weight of finally being real to someone who had been real to him for so long. "What happens now?" Hope asked. Harold looked at them both, the little girl who had grown up writing to him and the young woman who had never known about his existence until today. "That's up to you," he said. Over the following months, Emma and Hope worked with Harold to contact his other long-term correspondents. The revelation spread through Harold's accidental family like ripples in a pond, each person grappling with the discovery that their lifelong friend was not who they thought he was. Marcus, now a police sergeant in Detroit with 3 children, drove 8 hours to meet Harold in person. "You saved my life," he said simply, sitting in the same chair where Emma had sat months earlier. "I was ready to give up on everything when I was 16. Your letters gave me hope." Jennifer, the college student who had become a successful attorney in San Francisco, flew to meet Harold during her Christmas vacation. She brought her teenage son, who had been writing to Uncle Harold since he could hold a pencil. Not everyone took the revelation well. 3 of Harold's correspondents stopped writing entirely, feeling betrayed by the deception. Others struggled with the realization that their most trusted confidant was a stranger. But 37 of Harold's pen pals chose to continue the relationship, now built on truth instead of accident. Today, Harold's house is filled with photographs of real faces to match the voices he's known for decades. His refrigerator displays artwork from Emma's daughters, Marcus's twins, and a dozen other children who call him Grandpa Harold. His mailbox still overflows, but now the letters come from people who know exactly who he is. Emma brings her daughters to visit every month. Hope, who quit journalism to write a book about Harold's story, helps him manage his correspondence. Marcus calls every Sunday. Jennifer sends care packages. The network of people Harold accidentally collected has become an intentional family, choosing each other across the distances that geography and circumstance created. Harold, now 88, still writes letters every morning. His handwriting is shakier, his thoughts sometimes wander, but his care for his distant family remains steady. Mary, his assistant, has become a friend who understands the miracle of what Harold created through decades of small kindnesses. "Do you regret it?" Emma asked him recently, watching her 6-year-old daughter Lucy write her first letter to Grandpa Harold with careful, crooked letters that reminded Harold of Emma's earliest notes. Harold looked around his living room at the photo albums filled with strangers who became family, at the filing cabinets full of 30 years of human connection, at Lucy's tongue sticking out in concentration as she wrote. "Regret what?" he said. "The lying or the loving?" "Either. Both." Harold considered the question seriously, as he always did Emma's inquiries. It was one of the things that had made their correspondence so meaningful. Harold never gave easy answers. "I regret that I wasn't brave enough to tell the truth sooner," he said finally. "But I don't regret answering that first letter. Sometimes the most important things in life happen by accident. Sometimes strangers become family, not because they're supposed to, but because they choose to." Harold's story has touched dozens of lives across 3 decades, creating connections that transcend geography, age, and even truth. His accidental family has produced teachers, police officers, parents, entrepreneurs, and dreamers, people who learned to believe in themselves because a lonely retired teacher took the time to write them letters. The original letters, Emma's first note about sharing cookies at summer camp, Marcus's desperate plea for help with bullies, all the others, are preserved in Harold's dining room like artifacts of human connection. They remind everyone who visits that sometimes the smallest gestures create the largest changes. Harold Whitman proved that family isn't always about blood relations or shared history. Sometimes it's about an old man with arthritis who decides to answer letters meant for someone else, and in doing so, discovers that love can travel across any distance, bridge any gap, and transform any life, including his own. In a world increasingly connected but somehow more isolated, Harold's story stands as a testament to the power of consistent kindness, genuine interest in others' lives, and the courage to love strangers until they become family. He taught his accidental children that they mattered, that someone was listening, that they were worthy of care and attention. In return, they taught him that loneliness is a choice, that purpose can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the best families are the ones you build yourself, letter by letter, year by year, with nothing but patience and love. The mail still comes to 1247 Maple Street, and Harold still answers every letter. Some habits, especially the ones built on love, are too beautiful to break.